Hi and welcome back to Like Maria. Today I'm talking about Jekyll and Hyde and I'm talking about duality. So let's get started. I'm going to talk about the beginning of the very last chapter. So that's chapter 10, Henry Jekyll's full statement of the case. The quotation I want to work from today is, "Man is not truly one, but truly two." And this is in the first bit of chapter 10. Henry Jekyll is writing his kind of biographical origins, and he's talking to us, and obviously to Utterson in the letter, about the way in which he was brought up and the way in which he came to decide his philosophical ideas about man. And he comes to this conclusion, not truly one, but truly two. So he's talking about two sides of a personality, a character, a being. Now, this was very popular in the Victorian era, and many scientists were beginning to think about the consciousness and the subconsciousness of people's makeup. And they were talking about something called double consciousness. And there were particularly some French scientists who were writing papers about this. And we have evidence from Stevenson's wife that Stevenson himself read one of these papers about double consciousness that investigated the two sides of human nature. So straight away we can see from this quote that he's come to a conclusion about something that lots of people in this era were talking about. Man is not truly one, but truly two. In the rest of this passage, at the very beginning of this chapter, I want to talk about the dichotomy of these two characters that Jekyll is referring to. He refers to them as unjust and just, the ill side of the character and the good side of the character. Now, this is something which we can take back to biblical times, good and ill, just and unjust. So we've got lots of precedent for this, and lots of literature is involved in dealing with these sides, different sides of human nature like this. In this particular passage, and again I'm looking at the very beginning of chapter 10, there are some particular things that Jekyll refers to that are going to be really useful for talking about duality. He talks about these two natures, good and ill, having a perennial war within him. So within his body, within his consciousness, he feels that these two natures are struggling, and he describes this as a war. So he's using this imagery of war, battling, going up against each other, something that these two are facing up to each other and trying to win him over, perhaps. One good and one evil. And we know that ultimately he can't fight off the evil and he succumbs to the evil. So we could say here that the evil wins this perennial war. And again, we have another quote, two natures that contended. They are going up against each other. They are fighting. They are battling, fits in with the perennial war idea, against each other. And they are contending for the prize, and the prize is the full consciousness, to get full consciousness. They want to convert Jekyll, as it were, to one side or the other. So that quote is really important, two natures that were contending. Another way that he describes these two elements of his character is that they were polar twins. And he uses this twin imagery quite a bit, talking about the unjust twin, for example. So he uses this imagery of polar twins, and he talks about them being in the womb. And they were kind of birthed, they were something natural, but they are very, very different. Polar meaning from different ends of the pole, different ends of the spectrum. They are contending with each other from completely different ideas and ideologies. He talks about the womb imagery, that the one person gave birth to these two twins. And this is really interesting for us in a modern day context when we know about the science of twins. We know, for example, that some identical twins are born from the the same cells, and we know that sometimes non-identical twins inhabit the same space in the womb but are different entities. So there's another layer of interest there for us. The last quotation I want to talk about is when he talks about incongruous faggots. Now, a faggot in this context is a bundle of sticks. And that word incongruous means it doesn't fit with other things. So two things are incongruous, they don't match with each other. So here he's saying that I felt that within me there were kind of two bundles of sticks and they didn't fit with each other. They didn't join to each other. They were not joined properly as they should have been. My nature is split and divided, and these two things are never going to marry up. So from this first part of chapter 10, we get the understanding that there is something very disturbed within Jekyll's nature, and he explains it to himself and to us as these two different natures, these two different elements of his personality, we might call it today, are battling with each other, and he decides that the solution to this is to separate them, and that's why he creates the potion. He creates the chemical compound in order to drink it, because he thinks that he can perhaps separate these two and have different physical embodiments of good and evil. Now, of course, this is very much what gets him into trouble. So there you have it. The roots of his ideas can be found at the beginning of this chapter, and they are to do with him feeling very, very uncomfortable, and they hark back to this idea of double consciousness that was just emerging in that Victorian era. He decides to separate them out. So there you have some ideas, some quotations from the beginning of chapter 10 about duality. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.